Inside a colonial courthouse in Ho Chi Minh City, 104 boxes of evidence sat stacked against the walls. Together, they weighed 6 tons. 10 prosecutors, 200 lawyers, and 2,700 witnesses had been summoned. And at the center of it all sat a 67-year-old woman. Visibly exhausted, stripped of the glamour the Vietnamese public had always associated with her name. Her name is Truong My Lan, and on that day in April 2024, a Vietnamese court did something virtually unprecedented. They sentenced her to death by lethal injection for bank fraud. Not murder, not drug trafficking, fraud. The number, $44 billion in fraudulent loans extracted from a single bank over 11 years, larger than the GDP of most nations on Earth. 3 times bigger than Malaysia's 1MDB scandal. Prosecutors said she needed to return $27 billion, a sum they admitted may never be recovered. But here's what most reporting misses. This was never just about one woman. The real question is who let her do it, who profited alongside her, and why a decade of theft went untouched. Empire building. Truong My Lan was born in 1956 in Saigon to a Chinese-Vietnamese family from Guangdong province. She helped her mother sell cosmetics at Ben Thanh Market, one of Ho Chi Minh City's oldest trading grounds. Modest beginnings, but an early education in how relationships, not just products, drive business in Vietnam. In the late 1980s, Vietnam launched Doi Moi, sweeping reforms transitioning the country from a rigid state economy toward open markets. Lan saw opportunity. She started buying property. In 1992, she married Hong Kong businessman Eric Chu Nap Kee, and together they founded Van Thin Phat Group, a real estate firm that grew into luxury developments, hotels, and shopping centers across the city's most prime locations. By the 2000s, she was one of Vietnam's most influential businesswomen. But in Vietnam, where all land is technically state-owned, building an empire like that requires deep connections with those who control access. She had them. And by 2011, she spotted something far bigger than real estate. Fraud mechanism explained clearly. In 2011, 3 failing banks were merged under central bank supervision into Saigon Joint Stock Commercial Bank, SCB. Lan helped orchestrate the merger. This gave her ground floor access to one of Vietnam's largest lenders. Vietnamese law prohibits anyone from owning more than 5% of a bank. Lan didn't need legal ownership. She needed control. Think of it like wanting to own an entire apartment building when the rules say you can only hold 1 unit. So you create dozens of identities on paper, have each buy a unit, and control them all from behind the scenes. That's what she did with SCB shares, distributing over 90% of the bank's ownership across 70-plus proxy shareholders, relatives, associates, and nominees. On paper, diversified ownership. In reality, her private, financial machine. Then came extraction. She created hundreds of ghost companies, entities existing only on paper, which applied for loans from SCB. Since Lan had installed her own people as bank managers, every loan was rubber-stamped. Money flowed from the bank, through shell companies, and straight into her orbit. Over 11 years, 2,500 fraudulent loans were issued, 93% of SCB's entire loan book. Total disbursements reached $44 billion, roughly 10% of Vietnam's GDP. Between 2019 and 2022 alone, prosecutors say drivers physically withdrew over $4 billion in cash and delivered it to her residence and Van Thin Phat headquarters. That volume of banknotes would weigh approximately 2 tons. Red flags. So, how does someone drain 93% of a bank's loans for a decade without raising alarms? The uncomfortable truth: people did notice. Market observers in Ho Chi Minh City openly discussed how Van Thien Phat was using SCB as its personal funding source. As La Hong Heap from Singapore's ISEAS Institute noted, it wasn't a secret. It was well known in the market that Truong My Lan was using SCB as her own piggy bank. But it's such a common practice. SCB isn't the only bank used like this. That last sentence is the one that should keep you up at night. The practice of business elites using banks as personal treasuries wasn't some anomaly in Vietnam. It was widespread. Lan just did it on a scale nobody imagined possible. System failure analysis. This is where the story shifts from individual criminality to systemic rot. Vietnam's banking system had a fundamental vulnerability: weak ownership transparency and chronic regulatory capture. The 5% ownership cap was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of concentration. But without meaningful enforcement, it was just a number on paper. A former chief inspector at Vietnam's central bank accepted a $5.2 million bribe from Lan and was eventually sentenced to life in prison. 15 former state bank officers, 3 government inspectorate officials, and 1 state audit office officer were all tried alongside her. In total, 86 people were convicted. David Brown, a retired U.S. State Department official with long experience in Vietnam, was more direct. Up until 2016, the party in Hanoi pretty much let this Sino-Vietnamese mafia run the place. They would make all the right noises, but at the same time, they were milking the city for a substantial cut of the money being made down there. The system didn't just fail to catch Lan. It was, in many ways, designed to produce someone exactly like her. Collapse. In October 2022, Lan was arrested. Within days, 3 SCB employees committed suicide. Panic spread. Depositors rushed to branches and ATMs across the country, triggering a bank run that threatened systemic contagion. Vietnam's central bank had to intervene with an unprecedented $24 billion rescue package, special loans representing roughly 6% of the nation's total economic output, just to keep SCB from collapsing and dragging the financial system down with it. Let that number sit for a moment. The cost of saving the bank Lan hollowed out was itself larger than the economies of dozens of countries. Her trial, beginning in March 2024, became the most spectacular judicial proceeding in Vietnamese history. 5 weeks later, the death sentence was handed down. Her appeal failed in December 2024, but in June 2025, Vietnam abolished the death penalty for embezzlement entirely, and her sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Human cost. The damage didn't end in a courtroom. Over 35,000 individual investors lost money through fraudulent bonds issued by Van Thien Phat subsidiaries. Vietnam's real estate sector cratered. An estimated 1,300 property firms withdrew from the market in 2023. Shophouse rents in Ho Chi Minh City dropped by a third. The cost to Vietnamese taxpayers for the bank bailout alone could take a generation to recover. And then there's the paralysis. Officials across the country became terrified of making any decision that might later implicate them in corruption cases. Red tape ballooned, investment approvals stalled. The very campaign designed to restore confidence began freezing the economy it was meant to protect. Psychological autopsy. Lan's trajectory follows a pattern seen in nearly every mega-fraud case. Early success built through real skill and genuine ambition. Then the realization that the system's rules were suggestions, enforceable only against those without connections. Each successful transgression reinforced the belief that she was untouchable. Each year without consequences made the next escalation easier. But there's something specific to Lan's psychology worth noting. She didn't flee. She had the resources, the international connections through her Hong Kong husband, and the offshore infrastructure to disappear. Instead, she kept going, as if the act of extraction had become its own compulsion, separate from any rational calculation of risk. Reflective ending. Vietnam painted this case as proof that no one is above the law. But the uncomfortable reality is more instructive. The system that produced Truong My Lan remains largely intact. Corruption is still woven into daily Vietnamese life, from land use certificates to medical care to school admissions. The Blazing Furnace campaign has toppled 2 presidents and jailed hundreds. Yet analysts warn it may be less about reform than about political consolidation within the Communist Party. As one researcher observed, corruption has been the grease that kept Vietnam's economic machinery working. Remove it too aggressively, and the machine itself might seize up. Keep it running, and you guarantee the next Truong My Lan. That's the paradox Vietnam now faces. And it's a paradox without a clean answer. Because the same system that enabled the largest bank fraud in human history is the same system powering one of Asia's fastest-growing economies. The question isn't whether another scandal is coming. The question is how large it will be when it arrives.